Gauteng. I know that Honorable Mosai has joined virtually. We know that she will also be joining us in here. Hopefully, again, that Dr. Janchis would join us again here today. We are also looking forward to be joined by Mr. Chilwan, that from Gauteng, who did a presentation yesterday. Otherwise, all of the colleagues from our side in the legislature are here. I think we've got one apology from Honorable Kika, who will be joining the meeting a bit late, but is coming. We appreciate all of the chairpersons that have joined, including the Deputy Chair of Chairs, who's with us here. We appreciate your presence, Honorable Kunene, as well as all of the honorable members that have joined, including those that have joined virtually. So again, we believe that today we are not going to have a long day. Of course, Dr. Miataza was, presented to us yesterday. We really appreciate, and hopefully he will again join us today. I was not planning to do just as to what we did yesterday, because I believe all of us were here. So I will not bore you in doing the reflection of yesterday's work that we did. I think we are mainly going to focus on what we are going to be doing. Welcome, Malmegazi, Honorable Mtwana. Welcome, Malmegazi wam. Welcome, poet. Welcome, honorable members. Today we have just opened again. We are going to request our legal Vena, Miss Benjiman. Am I pronouncing correct? Benjiman. Oh, okay. Yeah. Benjiman. I prefer calling people with their last names as opposed to the first name. My apology for that pronunciation. It's just that we are rural boys, so we sometimes we battle. So we're going to have two presentations today. We are going to allocate more time for discussions so that we are clear on what we ought to do. I think, honorable members, it's going to be up to us which direction we want to take. Whether we still want to, we believe that the process that we have embarked on is enough for us to be able to finalize the processes that we are in terms of the bill, or we believe that we still need to do further work, more on fact-finding, more studies that we need to undertake. Of course, it's going to be up to us. But today, this morning, we are going to do clause-by-clause presentation of the KZN Money Bills Amendment Procedure and Related Matters Bill. And then We will then, of course, take the second presentation, which is saying strengthening the existing KZN Budget Content Unit. Now, it's going to be out of us as the collective here, how do we want to structure that again? And then we'll then go have a discussion, and then we'll request the chair of chairs to come and do the vote of thanks, and then we close. We do not anticipate that we'll have a full day. Should be out of here latest 12 o'clock because we have started a bit late. So we are then going to go straight to Miss Benjiman. I hope this time around I'm politically correct in that pronunciation, and then you then take us through on the clause by clause. It's going to be beamed, but of course, honorable members, I believe that all of us we've been given the presentation to go through it even before this morning. Let me give it to you. You've got an hour to take us through. Of course, if you do not finish, we will not kill you.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Over to you.
Unfortunately, my husband's family couldn't spell. So it's Benjiman, like the normal Benjiman, but the spelling just came out like that. Yeah. Good morning, honorable members. Welcome to day 2. I think we want to just, if you recall the last time when we presented the bill, members wanted a clause by clause breakdown of the bill. So we're going to try as best as we can to break down this bill and help to create clarity in the minds of members. All right. Is it beaming correctly, Spa, on the virtual platform? No, I'm sharing. I just want to make sure it's fine. All right. Okay, let's start off with, on a most basic level, the need for the money bills legislation. They say a good lawyer always starts with the Constitution as the supreme law of the land. And we find that in section 123 of the Constitution, it provides that a provincial act must provide for a procedure by which the province's legislature may amend a money bill. So you'll find from that provision in the Constitution that legislatures are empowered to amend money bills, but it may only exercise such power if it has passed legislation, so a provincial act, which is contemplated in section 123 of the Constitution. So as KZN legislature, we desire to fulfill our constitutional responsibility as well as enhance the exercise of oversight over the provincial executive on the provincial budget. Now, the speakership in a strategic planning session in 2019 pointed out that there is a legislative gap that needs to be addressed that will empower the legislature to enhance its oversight. So the passing of the money bills amendment legislation was also noted on the institution's strategic risk register, and it's on the current strategic risk register for the current financial year as part of KZN legislature's risk treatment plan. All right. What informs the version of the bill that has been circulated to members? So I would encourage all members to go to the bill. We have circulated it on the virtual platform, but the actual bill itself, please go through it and read it in context. But the bill drafting was informed by various things. Number one, it was informed by the Constitution, the Section 123. And then we also looked at the Money Bills and Related Matters Act 2009. It was amended in 2019 as well, which is the National Act that you'll find, recently in Parliament when it came about the amendment of the budget. There was a lot of reference to this National Act and its provisions. Now, in this National Act, the Money Bills and Related Matters Act, there's a schedule at the back, and it sets out norms and standards for provincial legislatures. So we've had to look at the norms and standards in the National Act, which guides us as well in terms of our Provincial Act. We also we heard yesterday from our colleagues in the other provinces, so we also had to look at their respective legislations. So we looked at the Gauteng Provincial Legislature Money Bills Amendment Procedure and Related Matters Act, which Gauteng passed in 2019. We also looked at the Eastern Cape Money Bills Amendment Procedure and Related Matters Act, which the Eastern Cape Provincial Legislature passed in 2020. And we also did benchmarking with the Parliamentary Budget Office, which we've been calling the PBO, with those respective legislatures who've already passed the legislation. We also benchmarked with the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. They had quite a big workshop where they invited various stakeholders, but at the end they came up with policy options with regard to their bill. So they as far as we know, they haven't enacted any legislation as yet. We also engaged with the Financial and Fiscal Commission, and they were present at a previous workshop with the office, and they also presented comments to us. And then we also did the benchmarking at the African Network of Parliamentary Budget Officers, or ANPBO, and that's what Tumelo and I were sharing yesterday about, and we will, at the second session, we'll also share a little bit more about that. I want to say right at the beginning that the bill version that we are presenting to you is a working document. So the committees, the Finance Portfolio Committee and the committees, we will welcome input so that we can, at the end of the day, have a version of the bill that the committees are happy with and that we can take out and consult with stakeholders on. So the end result of this workshop and our engagements even with the Finance Portfolio Committee is a version that we can go and consult on, and that may result in further tweaks and amendments. So this is a working document, it's not set in stone. In terms of the bill content, sorry, it's not on your slide, but we will share the renewed or the revised presentation. We've just added 2 more slides just to take you quickly through the bill content. Clause 1 is the definitions. Clause 2 is the objects of the Act. Clause 3 is the application of the Act, and I'm going to discuss all of them in detail, but I'm just giving you just a quick overview. Clause 4 deals with the Finance and Budget Committee. Clause 5 deals with the functions and powers of the Finance and Budget Committee. Clause 6 deals with the procedure prior to introduction of provincial budget. Clause 7 deals with the medium-term budget policy statement, while Clause 7 deals with the introduction of the provincial annual budget. Clause 9 sets out general principles when amending money bills. So this is where the meat is with regard to process. Clause 10, amending appropriation bills. It sets out, before the committee can propose any amendments, it sets out the process to be followed before such amendments can be proposed. So this is the meat from Clause 10 onwards in terms of process. Clause 11 talks about the process for amending revenue bills and revenue proposals. Clause 12 talks about the process when you are wanting to amend adjustments appropriation bills. Clause 13 speaks about amendments proposed by the MEC for finance. Clause 14 speaks about the the support to the portfolio committees, and this is where we speak about the unit and its role. And then clause 15 talks about other support to the Finance and Budget Committee. Clause 16 is your public participation clause. Clause 17 is about inserting timeframes in the standing rules, and clause 18 is your short title. So it's not a long bill by any means. It's an 18-section bill. So I'm going to briefly now take you through clause by clause on this bill. In terms of the bill preliminaries, we have a cover page to the bill which sets out the name of the bill, which is the KwaZulu-Natal Money Bills Amendment Procedure and Related Matters Bill, and we've given it a year, which is the 2025 year. A bill has to be introduced in the House. In this case, it's going to be a committee bill. So it's going to be introduced by the Finance Portfolio Committee. And then if you look at page 1 of the bill, you have something that we call underneath the word bill, we have something called the long title of the bill. It's a nutshell of what the bill is about. And the long title in this bill is to provide for a procedure to amend money bills before the KZN legislature and to deal with matters related to that. And then you'll also find a preamble. And here, the preamble basically sets out why the legislation is necessary. It's an introduction to the bill, so to speak. So it goes back to the Constitution and the sphere of government, and not assuming any power or function except those conferred on them in terms of the Constitution. So it reinforces the respect for the various spheres of government and their powers. And then it sets the context for this legislation. The MEC for Finance is the only one who can introduce a money bill. And then it reaffirms the legislative authority of the province, which is the provincial legislature. And then it talks about the authority for this bill, which is section 123. And it talks about the purpose, right? The purpose of amending money bills, and it's something very, very important, is to give effect to resolutions of the legislature on oversight and to ensure that the provincial budget is responsive to the needs of the people of KwaZulu-Natal. So that's quite an important thing that we need to always bear in mind when it comes to amending money bills. Clause 1 of the bill is your definitions clause. So I don't want to bore members by going into each and every definition, but it basically sets out those definitions that are used in the Act, all right? And maybe just to point out and flag certain definitions that we need to pay special attention to. And that's, first one I want to point out is that of the Finance and Budget Committee. And it's defined as the portfolio committee of the legislature responsible for matters of finance and budget. So if you note here, we've got the Finance Portfolio Committee, but here we get an inkling of the fact that it's, the idea here is the renaming of the Finance Committee, Portfolio Committee, to reflect the dealing with the budget aspect. You've seen yesterday that there's separate budget committees in the two other provincial legislatures. But here we're looking at possibly using the existing Finance Portfolio Committee to also deal with the budget aspects. And then we'll discuss it further as we go on. Now, there's also the definition of fiscal framework. It's quite a lengthy definition here. I'm not going to go through it in detail. So it's just the framework for a specific financial year that gives effect to the provincial executive's macroeconomic policy. And then it goes on to set out what that definition includes. I'm comfortable going through each and every definition, but for the sake of time, I would just summarize if that's fine with the members here. Another important definition that I'd like to draw the attention of members to is that of the medium-term budget policy statement. Now, it's something new, right? And it's a key definition because it sort of, it gives the legislature and committees a chance to engage at a much earlier point in time before the provincial budget is tabled. You're going to get a first bite of the apple, so to speak, right? So it's an opportunity to engage with the planning on the budget. So the medium-term budget policy statement, it's a provincial policy document that sets out funding priorities, the intended spending plans of government for 3 years, and the provincial policy framework for the next coming financial year. So just bear that definition in mind. We'll discuss it in more detail when we get to the substantive provisions. Okay. Portfolio committees, as used in the bill, means all committees in the legislature responsible for overseeing various budget votes. So what I need to emphasize this morning is that it's not just going to be the finance or the renamed finance and budget committee that has a role to play in the budget. It's going to be all portfolio committees. Hence, we've invited chairpersons of portfolio committees to be here today as well. The objects of the Act, Clause 2 of the bill. The objects of the Act sets out what the bill seeks to achieve, right? So the objects of the Act are to give effect to that constitutional provision set out in Section 123, the one that requires a provincial act before a province may amend a money bill. Secondly, the objects of the Act are to enhance the exercise of oversight over the provincial executive on the provincial budget. Currently, as it stands, the legislature or portfolio committees only have an opportunity to reject or accept and no power of amendment. So this bill is intended to enhance the exercise of oversight on the provincial budget. And then thirdly, the object of the Act is also to enhance public participation on amendments of money bills. So it's not going to be something where the public is excluded, but public consultation and public participation is very, very key as well, because we know the budget at the end of the day affects the citizens of our country. In terms of the application of the Act, who does this Act apply to, or what does it apply to? It says here that this Act applies to all money bills before the legislature. Now, I'm going to be very frank with members here today because it's a workshop. And if we find something that discrepancies or the way provinces have done it differently, we're going to point it out so that we can seek your input as well. Now, there's first something to think about whether we need to enhance this application of the Act to go beyond money bills per se, because if you look at the national legislation, they amended their application of Act in 2019, and it was enhanced to include even documents. And what National did was they extended the application to include things like the medium-term budget policy statement, and as well as the fiscal framework. So it's something that we need to think about as well, maybe to take it and align with what the National Parliament has said in their application, not just money bills, but also to these other budget documents like your medium-term budget policy statement, your fiscal framework, etc. Clause 4 of the bill is quite a key provision. So I'm just going to read it verbatim. Please bear with me, and then I'll make a few comments on it. The clause heading is Finance and Budget Committee, and it says as follows: in addition to the powers and functions conferred on it by the Constitution, the standing rules and resolutions by the House, the Finance and Budget Committee is responsible for the consideration of money bills and all proposed amendments to money bills in terms of this Act. So what this provision does is it locates money bills and the amendment of money bills with a specific committee, which is the renamed Finance and Budget Committee. This is different from Parliament, the Eastern Cape Provincial Legislature, as well as the Gauteng Provincial Legislature Acts. Because nationally we have two committees, your Finance and your Appropriation Committees. And in Eastern Cape and Gauteng, they've made provision in their legislation for a new budget committee, right? So this is KZN's first point of departure, and this is just proposed. So it's not set in stone, it's proposed. The use of the existing Finance Portfolio Committee to do the work of the Budget Committee as proposed in the other legislation. What are the pros of using this kind of approach, using an existing committee, which is the Finance Portfolio Committee? It's an issue of cost savings. If you have to set up an entirely new committee, there will be a financial implication, so it's partially cost savings. And more importantly, I think, is the continuation of existing work. If you look at what the Finance Portfolio Committee does, there is a lot of overlap with what the functions that will be anticipated from a budget committee. So there's the whole aspect of continuation of work. I also need to point out that this Finance and Budget Committee, in terms of the bill, will take on a central coordinating role with regard to money bills, right? So you will find in the provisions of the bill, this committee must mediate between portfolio committees proposing conflicting amendments to the appropriation bill. I gave an example yesterday. If the Health Portfolio Committee thinks that the health department will benefit more in terms of increased budget, while education, the Education Portfolio Committee may have a conflicting view and may feel that, no, education will benefit more from increased budget. You have these two conflicting proposals. And this is where the Finance and Budget Committee comes in with a mediating role, right? And we did explain, and as we go into the clauses, we did explain that there's going to be a senior manager. There's a proposed senior manager, experienced and qualified to be able to assist the Finance and Budget Committee, in terms of resolving this kind of conflicting proposed amendments to the budget. It's also important at this point in time to also raise something key. The Finance Portfolio Committee exercises oversight of its own, right? The Finance Portfolio Committee exercises oversight of provincial treasury, so it has its own vote. So the question arises now, if you're going to expect the Finance Portfolio Committee now, in addition to its own vote, to take on additional work, should you not let the Finance Portfolio Committee just focus on its own vote and be better in terms of its oversight of its own vote, right? So I'm just pointing out, we said we were going to be frank about all of the pros and the cons, right? So they also it raises the issue of conflict as well. We spoke about proposing amendments. Now, a budget committee, a separate budget committee, stands on its own without its own vote, right? So if what's happening? Okay, all right. So if the finance and budget portfolio committee still has to oversee provincial treasury, what if the finance and portfolio budget committee says, but I think treasury needs to get more budget as opposed to help? You know, there's a possibility of conflict there. And they are also conflicted now because they're overseeing provincial treasury. So I'm just flagging this. It's something to think about. Do we, in that instance, we're just looking at solutions. Do we have to say, for that instance, if that comes up and it involves an issue of provincial treasury, then do we look at an ad hoc or sourcing external advice on that particular one? We've made provision in the bill, and we'll come to that. All right, so those are the pros and the cons of using the existing Finance Portfolio Committee. Now let's look at the functions and powers of the Finance and Budget Committee. It's a very, very key provision. So I ask members to please just pay a special attention to this part, because we are looking at here, what does the Finance Portfolio Committee do, the existing work? Because I'm sure you all want to know, where's the more work coming in? And so this is the part where we look at, do we do this as the Finance Portfolio Committee, or is it new work, right? So the Finance and Budget Committee must consider all money bills referred to it. This is clause 5.1a. It does do that. It does consider money bills, the appropriation bill, adjustments appropriation bill. It doesn't consider the unauthorized expenditure bill. So it does consider money bills in the main. The Finance and Budget Committee must examine the draft provincial budget policy statement, which is presented by the MEC for Finance in the House. It must evaluate budget estimates, economic and budgetary policies, and programs. This is something new, right? The draft provincial budget policy statement, it's something new. So it's going to be something new to the Finance Portfolio Committee. It's also an opportunity to engage earlier in the budget process, to exercise oversight, as well as influence the budget. Now, the Finance and Budget Committee must also consider and report on, I'm on clause 5.1c of the bill. 5.1c, Roman numeral 1. The Finance and Budget Committee must consider and report. So there's two aspects. The committee must deliberate, consider this, as well as report to the House on it, on the provincial socio-economic outlook and fiscal policy. Now, so the Finance and Budget Committee has to engage more on this aspect, the provincial socio-economic outlook and fiscal policy. Currently, it does do so superficially in some way. If you look at the Green Book, it is covered at the beginning. So it is dealt with superficially, but there's going to be a more in-depth engagement on the provincial socio-economic outlook and fiscal policy. Then the Finance and Budget Committee must also consider and report on the provincial appropriation bill and amendments thereto. And that's what the Finance Portfolio Committee, it does do that. So this is not something new. The Finance Committee must also consider and report on actual expenditure published by Provincial Treasury. The Finance Portfolio Committee does do that, and it's in the form of budget hearings. The Finance and Budget Committee must also consider and report on actual revenue published by the Provincial Treasury, and we are saying that the Finance Portfolio Committee does do this in its budget hearings. And the committee must also consider and report on recommendations by the FFC, right? So we do know that there is a process in the legislature for all committees to be briefed by the FFC, not just the Finance Portfolio Committee. So this is not something entirely new. The Finance and Budget Committee is also expected to receive reports on the provincial budget from portfolio committees, right? Now, currently, the Finance Portfolio Committee doesn't have that kind of coordinating role, right? We know that each committee reports on its own vote to the House, right? But now a contemplated change in process is that those reports from all the committees pertaining to the budget and the respective votes will come to the central coordinating committee, which is the Finance and Budget Committee, that has the key expertise in the form of the senior manager with that specialized qualification to advise the Finance and Budget Committee, right? So the Finance and Budget Committee is expected to receive all the reports on the provincial budgets from all the portfolio committees, and then it needs to now start to deliberate as a committee themselves, right? It needs to consider total aggregates of the budget. Yes, it does do that during the budget, the hearings. Those things are uplifted from the Green Book. It also needs to invite members of portfolio committees to attend the Finance and Budget Committee meetings when issues relating to their sector are being considered. Yes, that it is currently being done. So this is no new work anticipated here. The committee must also make recommendations to the House on the overall budget allocation. And the Finance Portfolio Committee does do so in its report on budget hearings for the whole budget. And it looks at vote 6 separately, as do other committees in respect of their respective votes. So that's not entirely new. And the committee is also expected to investigate, I'm looking at clause 5.2a, just to contextualize you. The Finance and Budget Committee, this is a may, so it's not, you're not forced to, it's a may, right? So you have the power there and you have a discretion whether to exercise it. But you may investigate and report on issues that are referred to it or on its own initiative. Yes, you can identify, for example, a focus intervention study. You can do something at your own initiative. You can also call any person to provide evidence, summons persons, etc., to appear before the committee. It's not a new power. It's a constitutional power. It's an existing power. It's also a power in the standing rules, and it's a power that will be drawn into the legislation. The committee will also may hold public hearings and receive comments from the public. It's not something that's new. The existing Finance Portfolio Committee does do this, and it's also entrenched in the standing rules. And then there's a catch-all at the end. It may exercise any power granted to it in terms of the Act, any other relevant legislation, and the standing rules. So that's the extent of the powers of the Finance and Budget Committee in terms of this bill. Now, clause 6 of the bill is a key provision, right? Because it sets out procedure prior to introduction of the provincial budget. You will note from this bill that there's a lot of pre-budget engagement. And I think the aim here is to get involved earlier rather than later. The earlier you are involved, the more power you have to influence the budget, and the less the need for amendments after introduction of the budget, if you can follow the reasoning here. And it's not something that just emanates from our legislation, but it's in the Parliament's national government's legislation dealing with money bills, as well as the provinces as well. So the procedure prior to the introduction of the provincial budget, the legislature through its committees must annually assess the performance of each department with reference to the following. And there's a list there. I'm going to go through it. It's a current practice. It's not something new, right? And this is what must be assessed through the committees. The medium-term estimates of expenditure of each provincial department, its strategic goals and measurable objectives as tabled in the legislature with the provincial budget. Yes, it's been done. We received the Green Book as committees, and it's done by all committees, right? They must also annually assess the performance of each department with regard to the prevailing strategic plans. Yes, it's been done. So it's not something new anticipated here. It must also assess the performance of each department in relation to its APPs, annual performance plans, and operational plans. It's being done. It must assess the performance of each department with regard to the expenditure report relating to each department published by the provincial treasury. Yes, committees monitor monthly. Hence, we have monthly meetings as committees, right? The assessment of the performance of each department with regard to the financial statements and annual reports of each department. Yes, we have the AG reports, closeout reports. Each committee tables an analysis of their respective departments' annual reports. So it's not new work anticipated here. And it just reaffirms the current practice. And then you also need to assess the performance of each department with regard to the reports of the AG relating to each department. Yes, it's currently being done. The AG reports are used, and it's a basis for SCOPA hearings as well. And each portfolio committee attends these hearings, so this is almost a reaffirming of existing process and in the legislature. Continuing with the procedure prior to the introduction of provincial budget, in terms of the assessment of the performance of each department, with reference to the following, the reports of SCOPA relating to each department is also current practice, and any other information requested by or presented to the legislature. So that's a catch-all phrase as well, in the event that the other preceding paragraphs don't capture it. Now, there's something very key in clause 6.2 of the bill. It's something new, and we need to pay attention to it because we said we'll point out to you anything new in terms of procedure that the bill proposes. And it's something that emanates in the National Parliament's Act, as well as the two other provincial parliaments, provincial legislatures' acts on money bills and the amendments. And it's an abbreviation that we are using. It's BRRR. I know people don't like abbreviations, but just to explain what it means, it's this new form of report called a budgetary review and recommendation report. Budgetary review and recommendation reports. And these become important oversight documents. That is why I'm drawing members' attention to this new form of report, right? So clause 6.2 of the bill says portfolio committees must annually submit budgetary review and recommendation reports for tabling in the legislature for each department before the adoption of the appropriation bill. So this comes before the budget is tabled in the House, right? In terms of the format and the structure of these reports, it's something that is being done in National Parliament as well. So we can always get training and templates on the format of the budget review and recommendation reports, which will be used should this bill become a law. Now, what does these budget review and recommendation reports contain, right? Or what informs these reports? And this is quite important. A budget review and recommendation report must be informed by findings on the consideration of annual reports, half-year financial oversight reports, the medium-term budget policy statement report, SCOPA findings, and Auditor General recommendations. So these are very, very key reports because it synthesizes all of these different important documents into one document, which can be used for oversight purposes. And I think it's valuable, the fact that it brings through, the half-yearly financial oversight reports, the medium-term budget policy statement, the scope of findings, the AG recommendations into one report. It's a very, very key document, hence we're stressing it. The budget review and recommendation report must also provide for an assessment of the department's service delivery performance. So it must be reflected in this report. And then the budget review and recommendation report must also provide for an assessment on the effectiveness and efficiency of the department's use of available resources. It's quite an important thing. It's an area for oversight as well. And the budget review and recommendation report must also include recommendations on the advanced use of resources. So here's your opportunity to engage, with the department at an earlier stage on the use of resources. And each portfolio committee must submit its budget review and recommendation reports to the Finance and Budget Committee, right? And there's a time frame for that. Within 15 days of the tabling of the medium-term budget policy statement. We're going to speak a bit more about this, but there's a time frame here. And so it's each portfolio committee has to draft this report, the budget review and recommendation report, and then submit it to the Finance and Budget Committee, and within 15 days, right? And then it goes on further to say what the Finance and Budget Committee must do with those reports, budget review and recommendation reports that it receives from all of the portfolio committees. This is where the Finance and Budget Portfolio Committee is expected to scrutinize the budget review and recommendations reports submitted by the portfolio committees. And there's a time frame as well. Within 30 days after receiving the reports from the various portfolio committees, it must submit its recommendation to the House. I hope members are following the flow. Each committee will have to do the BRRR's budget review and recommendation reports, submit it to the coordinating committee, which is the Finance and Budget Committee, which has to scrutinize this report and then submit recommendations. It will be the Finance and Budget Committee that will submit recommendations to the House based on these budget review and recommendation reports. And then subsection 6, subsection 6, just to continue here. Each portfolio committee must, after its adoption by the House, submit its budget review and recommendation reports to the MEC, right? So it's going to go to the House. Each portfolio committee's BRRR reports are going to go to the House, and then after it's been adopted by the House, it's going to go to the respective MEC and responsible for the vote to which the report applies. So the Health Portfolios Committee's budget review and recommendation report, after it's been adopted by the House, will go to the MEC for Health, for example. And prior to the adoption of the reports on the medium-term budget policy statement, I see Gauteng does it prior to, right, in terms of their legislation. Eastern Cape says after the adoption of the report. So there's a bit of discrepancy. Maybe Ralph will share with us why they do it prior to, and Eastern Cape has a reason why they do it after. It will also guide our legislature. Subsection 6, subsection 7, it says additional budgetary and recommendation reports may be submitted at the discretion of the committee, right? So that's a catch-all. If you feel that if you want to submit additional reports, the committee has the discretion to do that. But I'm sure you can see now with the introduction of this new form of reporting prior to the adoption, prior to the tabling of the budget, there's a focus on oversight earlier in the process and engagement to influence the budget so that there's less post-budget tabling amendments. Now let's look at this very, very key concept here as well of the medium-term budget policy statement, right? It's quite important. So 7.1 says at least 4 months prior to the introduction of the provincial budget, the MEC must submit to the legislature a medium-term budget policy statement, right? Eastern Cape narrows it down, gives a little bit more time. It says 3 months, while Gauteng allows 4 months. So before the budget, the MEC must submit a medium-term budget policy statement. So prior engagement, a little bit of an earlier bite of the apple as well. What does the medium-term budget policy statement include? And this is very, very important, right? Because it will guide this new report or this new statement that the MEC for Finance must submit to the legislature. So for those officials from Treasury, I think they need to also flag this because it has implications for the provincial executive, right? So the medium-term budget policy statement must include an explanation of the economic and fiscal policy position, the economic projections, and the assumptions underpinning the fiscal framework. It must include the spending priorities of provincial government for the next 3 financial years. It must include the conditional grant allocations to departments, if any, and it must also include a review of actual spending by each department between 1 April and 30th September of the financial year in which the statement is tabled. So it requires this form of information. Let's go on. 7 subsection 3 says, the Speaker must refer matters referred to in subsection 2 to the Finance and Budget Committee and to each portfolio committee immediately after the submission of the medium-term budget policy statement by the MEC. So this will be introduced and tabled in the House by the MEC, the medium-term budget policy statement. And like we get other documents and bills referred to committees, it will be referred to each portfolio committee, as well as the Finance and Budget Portfolio Committee. And then the legislation goes on, the bill goes on to say in 7 subsection 4, what each portfolio committee must do. So this is where committee members must also just pay special attention to. When the medium-term budget policy statement comes to the committee, each committee must consider, discuss, and review the medium-term budget policy statement served upon it, specifically on matters of its concern and jurisdiction. So health will look at health issues, education will look at education issues. And each portfolio committee must incorporate its findings and recommendations into a report, right? And it must submit its report to the Finance and Budget Committee within 30 days of the receipt of the medium-term budget policy statement from the Speaker. So the committee has 30 days to deal with the medium-term budget policy statement in respect of its respective portfolio and send its report with its recommendations to the Finance and Budget Portfolio Committee. And then in 7 subsection 5, the bill sets out what the Finance and Budget Committee's role will be after receiving those reports. Again, it must scrutinize the allocations and reports submitted by the portfolio committees, and within 30 days, so another time frame here, after receiving the reports from the portfolio committees, submit its recommendations to the House. So you see again the coordinating and the advisory role here as well. And then the Speaker, in subsection 6, it must refer the House resolutions to the MEC as soon as reasonably possible thereafter. And it's important that this is done because we'll find later on in the bill, the MEC for Finance or the departments must also come and explain, you know, what were, after these House resolutions came to them. So it's another aspect of oversight as well. Clause 8 of the bill speaks about the introduction of the provincial annual budget. So we looked at all the pre-budget reporting and reports expected. Now we're looking at the introduction of the provincial annual budget. And as is normally done, the MEC must table the annual budget in the legislature. It's something that we always do in terms of the PFMA. The MEC must do that. And in addition, in addition to tabling the provincial annual budget, the MEC must table the following: a report to the legislature setting out reasons if it has not taken into account the recommendations contained in the report submitted by the portfolio committees in terms of section 6.4 or 7.4 of the Act, right? So remember those 6.4 reports, your budget and review recommendation reports, and your 7.4 is your medium-term budget policy statement, your House resolutions there. Now, when the MEC comes back to introduce the budget, the MEC must now table a report if it has not taken into account the recommendations by the portfolio committees. So this is an area of oversight here. Why have you not taken into account those aspects? So they must come, the executive must come and explain when they table the budget. And the MEC must also table the proposed fiscal framework for the next 3 financial years. But I think this is being done currently as well. And in addition, I'm looking at clause 8.2 of the bill. In addition to tabling the provincial annual budget, what else is the MEC required to table? It must table, the MEC must table the key economic assumptions underlying the fiscal framework over the medium-term expenditure framework. This is not something new. It is being currently done, if I'm not mistaken. And the MEC must also table the key fiscal ratios for the next financial years. It's done in the form of projections. Yes, the tax and revenue and other revenue proposals, including the contribution of the different revenue categories to the provincial revenue. Yes, it is being done. So this is not something new. I think the first one that we drew your attention to was something that is new. And then the MEC must also table cyclic factors taken into account in the formulation of the proposed fiscal framework for the next 3 financial years. It is being done in terms of the economic modeling, the assumptions. Just to continue on the additional aspects, the MEC must table with the budget. The MEC must table an estimate and breakdown of contingent liabilities for the next 3 financial years. Yes, that is done. And then the catch-all at the end, any other relevant information. Moving on to clause 9 of the bill, this is general principles when amending money bills. It comes directly from the national legislation, which prescribes norms and standards for provincial legislatures that enact money bills legislation. So it comes from the schedule to the National Money Bills and Related Matters Act, right? So we've reproduced it here because it applies to provincial legislatures. It's a norm and standard, right? So when considering an amendment to a money bill, the legislature through its committees must ensure that there's an appropriate balance between revenue, expenditure, and borrowing. The committees must ensure that debt levels and debt servicing charges are reasonable. The committees must ensure that the cost of recurrent spending is not deferred to future generations. And the committees must also ensure that there is adequate provision for spending on infrastructure. And to continue with the general principles when amending money bills, committees must ensure that there is development, overall capital spending and maintenance. Committees must consider the short-term and long-term implications of the fiscal framework, division of revenue, and national budget on the long-term growth potential of the economy and the development of the country. It must also take into account cyclic factors that may impact on the prevailing fiscal position, as well as take into account all public revenue and expenditure, including extra budgetary funds and contingent liabilities. And I just want to pause for a second. If you recall, Dr. Yankees spoke about ensuring, even in the amendment of money bills, ensuring there's not a disruption to the budget cycle. If, as a legislature or as committees, you are suggesting amendment of the budget, if you're going to unravel what has been done, and it's quite a lot of complex factors that go into putting the budget together. If you're going to unravel it, you have to really have to take into account all of this. So it's not going to be a simple exercise of amending the budget. It's quite a complex process that we must remember. That is why there's a lot of focus on pre-engagement rather than post-amendment of the budget in this type of legislation, not just with this bill, but even with the National Act as well as the other provinces. Clause 10 of the bill sets out specific processes now. Remember, the legislation says we need to set out a procedure for amending money bills. And one of the money bills that comes to the legislature annually is your appropriation bill, right? So we get the appropriation bill that's tabled by the MEC. It comes to the Finance and Budget Portfolio Committee. And it's been introduced by the MEC, right? And now, what if you want to amend the appropriation bill? Currently, we cannot, right? So this is important from that perspective. So clause 10.1 says the MEC must introduce the appropriation bill in the House and table proposals setting out the following: strategic goals, measurable objectives, other performance information for each department, public entity, or institution against its expected revenue and proposed expenditure by program, sub-program, and economic classification of items of expenditure. That is being done, right? Now, members of the Executive Council, I'm looking at 10 subsection 2, members of the Executive Council must table the updated annual performance plans and operational plans for their respective departments and entities, which must be referred to the relevant committee for consideration and reporting. That's been done. The appropriation bill must be referred to the Finance and Budget Committee, right? It's been done to the Finance Portfolio Committee, and Stakov deals with the aspect of the vote of the KZN legislature. And then subsection 4, portfolio committees, after consideration of their respective budget votes, must submit any proposals. This is where the amendment part comes in now, amendment process. Portfolio committees, after consideration of their respective budget votes, must submit any proposals for the amendment of the appropriation bill to the Finance and Budget Committee, right? And then the Finance and Budget Committee must mediate between portfolio committees proposing conflicting amendments to the appropriation bill. I've mentioned it before. You could get the scenario of two different portfolios wanting more or changes to the budget of their respective departments. So the Finance and Budget Committee will have a mediation role, right? And then any amendments to the appropriation bill must be consistent with the adopted fiscal framework. And all of those general principles in clause 9 that we drew the committee's attention to. And then in clause 10.7, the Finance and Budget Committee must recommend to the House that proposed amendments reported by other portfolio committees be rejected where those amendments are inconsistent with the fiscal framework or not motivated adequately in terms of this legislation. So the Finance and Budget Committee takes on a very strong advisory role in respect of the amendment of the money bill, as informed by the advice of the specialized committee unit that renders this advisory role. And 10.8 says the Finance and Budget Committee must give the MEC and any other member of the Executive Council When we say the MEC, we're referring to the MEC Finance, and any other member of the Executive Council affected by the proposed amendments at least 10 working days to respond to any amendments proposed to the appropriation bill prior to reporting to the House. So there's a right of response that the MEC for Finance, as well as the MEC of any affected department where an amendment is proposed, there's a right of reply or response to the proposed amendment. So it's a check and balance as well. Clause 10(9) says, a report of the Finance and Budget Committee to the House that propose amendments to the main appropriation bill must, in respect of each amendment, now we're talking process here, honorable members, it's just a little bit of nitty-gritty, right? So in respect of each amendment, it must indicate the reason for each proposed amendment. It must demonstrate how the amendment takes into account the strategic priorities and allocations of the relevant budget. It must demonstrate the implications of each proposed amendment for an affected vote and the main divisions within that vote. It must demonstrate the impact of any proposed amendment on the balance between transfer payments, capital, and recurrent spending in an affected vote. And it must set out the impact of any proposed amendments on service delivery. Sorry, just let me get back to that. Okay, set out the impact of any proposed amendment or service delivery. And the report of the Finance and Budget Committee must also set out the manner in which the amendment relates to prevailing departmental strategic plans, reports of the AG, it's very key here, committee reports adopted by the House, reports in terms of the PFMA, annual reports, and any other relevant information. So there are very in-depth requirements in terms of this legislation when you propose an amendment to a money bill. And Clause 10 sets out these requirements. And Clause 10.10 says a report, this report that we're talking about, the report of the Finance and Budget Committee on the amendments, must include the responses of the MEC and any other affected member of the Executive Council to any proposed amendments. So it's a very, very comprehensive document. Here are the proposed amendments. This is what the MEC and the departments are saying about those proposed amendments. And this is all contained in that report that goes to the House. And then the legislature must pass with or without amendments or reject the appropriation bill within 4 months after the start of the financial year to which it relates. So this clause now brings in that power which is not there in terms of the standing rules, the power to pass with amendments. Right. Clause 11 of the bill is about amending revenue bills and revenue proposals. It also comes from the national norms and standards. In amending revenue bills and revenue proposals, the legislature, through the Finance and Budget Committee, must ensure that the total amount of revenue raised is consistent with the fiscal framework approved by Parliament and the relevant DORA. It must also take into account the principles of equity, efficiency, certainty, and ease of collection. It must also consider the impact of the proposed change on the composition of tax revenue with reference to the balance between direct and indirect taxes. It must also consider national, provincial, regional, and international tax trends, as well as consider the impact on development, investment, employment, and economic growth. Now, let me take a very practical example to contextualize this. The Finance Portfolio Committee previously dealt with the KZN Gaming and Betting Tax Act, a tax bill. It was a money bill. It came through to the Portfolio Committee. The Finance Portfolio Committee had public participation on the bill. And then from the sector or the horse racing sector, the traditional horse racing sector, certain comments emanated. And there was a question, what if we adjust the tax rates, from 6%, for example, to 7%? That may not have been the correct percentages, but I'm just giving you an example. What if we amend the percentages in this money bill, because of what we heard from the traditional horse racing sector? And then we realized that we could not amend the percentages, right? So if that type of money bill comes back, a tax bill, gaming and betting tax bill, it's a provincial tax bill, right? If it comes back, and if you go on your public consultation and you find that there's certain aspects that are raised, before any amendment can be made, you'll have to have resource to legislation like this that will allow you to make amendments, but you'll have to consider these kind of factors. All right. With your permission, honorable members, I'm going to skip clause 12 because it's talking about amendments to adjustments appropriation bill, and it's similar to the amendments to the main appropriation bill. So I don't want to go into it again. Even clause 12, it's dealing with the adjustments, so it's a similar procedure. Let's go to clause 13, and I'm getting ready to the latter part of the presentation. And clause 13 deals with amendments proposed by the MEC. You find that there's a corresponding provision like this in the National Act as well as the other two provincial legislation that's out there. It says here, notwithstanding any other provision in this Act, the House or Finance and Budget Committee may consider an amendment to a money bill proposed by the MEC in order to make technical corrections to the bill. So this is minor typographical errors. This makes provision for that kind of amendment. Clause 14 of the bill is also nuts and bolts. It's quite important. And you would remember and recall from yesterday's presentation that we focused on our benchmarking with regard to the Kenya county budget officers, because we wanted to share with members the aspect of using a unit or this particular PBO-like structure, which has an advisory research component to it, to advise the Finance and Budget Committee and the legislature in dealing with complex money bills and the amendments, right? So the support, clause 14 is headed support to portfolio committees, right? Clause 14.1 says, in carrying out their duties and functions in terms of this Act, the Finance and Budget Committee and other portfolio committees, so it's just not limited just to the Finance and Budget Committees, all portfolio committees, must be supported by the relevant unit in the legislature responsible for budget, economic, and content analysis. The question was asked yesterday, what are other provinces doing? We got the national PBO, the director there, to come and share about the national PBO. They're a separate juristic structure, an independent juristic structure to Parliament. So they render independent independent technical advice. And the other two provinces have the external structures. I think Gauteng, Ralph, you have an external, it's a structure, right? So the question arose, we have an existing unit that deals with budget. It's called the Economic and Budget Content Analysis Unit. The question arose about using an existing unit to do the work of a PBO-like structure. All right, so this is what clause 14 of the bill, it deals with that aspect, right? So it must be supported, the Finance and Budget Committee as well as all portfolio committees must be supported by the relevant unit responsible for budget, economic, and content analysis. And then subsection 2 makes provision for one dedicated member of the unit at the level of senior manager to advise and support the Finance and Budget Committee in its work, right? So it's something, the proposal here is to legislate on having that senior manager to support the Finance and Budget Committee. And that senior manager must also coordinate and advise on the reports and submissions of other portfolio committees to the Finance and Budget Portfolio Committees. If you've been following the presentation, there are going to be these reports coming from the portfolio committees to the Finance and Budget Committee, who's got the central coordinating, mediating, as well as reporting role to the House, right? So this senior manager must coordinate and advise on those reports coming from the other portfolio committees. So it's advice that's going to be technical in nature. So the qualifications of that person has to be very, very strong in the area of economic analysis and budgets and specialized knowledge to be able to, we spoke yesterday about information asymmetry, that parliaments and legislatures don't have the same level of expertise as a provincial executive, like Treasury or National Treasury, have the experts in budgetary information, and there's an information asymmetry. It seems as though provinces and parliament used to be at a little lower level, but we need expertise in a legislature who can speak the same language that Treasury is speaking, and on the same level, and be able to analyze these complex budgetary information documents. That's what I want to stress, that expertise is required in terms of the legislation. All right. Clause 14.3 of the bill sets out, it's a protection, and it entrenches the independence of the unit, the existing unit, right? It says each unit member must provide non-partisan, high quality, and independent technical analysis, objective and professional advice to the committee on matters related to the budget and other money bills. Now, this is not something that's just coming from us as KZN. If you look at the national law, it's there. If you look at the Eastern Cape and Gauteng, it's there, right? They want to entrench this aspect, non-partisan, high-quality, independent technical analysis, professional advice. They want to entrench it in law, right?
I'll give you additional 5 minutes. Okay. Yes.
Thank you. I'm so sorry. I took time just to be able to bring all members. I will try to summarize. And clause 4 of the bill, 14.4 says, the unit must report to the legislature any inappropriate political or executive interference which has the potential to prevent the unit from providing independent, objective, and professional advice on matters related to money bills. Now, this is a provision that has come from the Eastern Cape Act, and we brought it on board here. It seems like a useful kind of provision to guard against interference and also reinforce the independence of the administrative unit, right? There was an article that appeared, a journal article, that looked at a previous old draft bill for KZN on money bills amendment, and they complained that we seem to not have independence of the unit. So we just wanted to also guard against that, right? So that is why we've beefed up the provisions where we borrowed from the national as well as the provincial legislations. And we're going to discuss that further on in the next provision. Now, I just want to quickly summarize because I have less time. The unit must support the implementation of this act by undertaking research analysis for the Finance and Budget Committee, right? And it's going to be, so annually providing reviews and analysis of the documents that were tabled in the House, monitoring and synthesizing these reports with budgetary implications, and also need to keep abreast of policy debates and developments, right? I'm not going to go into all of this, but just to touch on 14.7, there must be a cooperative working relationship between the unit and other research structures within the legislature, as well as research structures and appropriate organs of state externally, because they will need support. And I just want to pause on this one here, because it's important. If it's something that's complex, that there's no capacity in-house to deal with, the bill does make provision for the procurement of the services of experts or consultants to render advice to the committee, right? And also to enter into strategic partnerships or seek the advice of other relevant bodies or institutions. So for example, you can get into a strategic partnership with the FFC, with the PBO. We can borrow from their expert knowledges. That is why we spoke about strategic partnerships. We can borrow from their knowledge if we lack the capacity. Clause 16 speaks about public participation when it comes to amendment of money bills, and it must be considered. And then there's also a requirement for timeframes in the standing rules. It comes from the norms and standards. And let me leave it at there, Honorable Chairperson. I trust that it was creating some sort of insight. Thank you.
No, thank you so much for a very detailed presentation. We really appreciate. The chairperson for Gauteng, as I had indicated, joined us, Honorable Mosai. We have agreed with her that because she's got other tasks before her, that she will be excused for a minute to just go and open the meeting and come back. So she's around. Of course, Mr. Chilwane has joined us also. We appreciate Honorable Dex, Honorable Chair of Chairs, Deputy Chief Whip. You are acknowledged, as well as all other members, Honorable Kanye, that have joined us. You are most welcome, as well as the Secretary for the Legislature with your team. Thank you so much. They told you yesterday it was hot, so you must come. Good. We appreciate your presence. Okay, honorable members, the presentation was detailed, and again, we'll do like we did yesterday. That members would be allowed to go out for tea and come back, so that we do not. We try to minimize in terms of time that we can waste. Here is the presentation. This is the core now of our workshop, because now we need to discuss as to how do we think and how do we feel that they are going to take this process forward. I must be honest, it is my first time interacting with this process. You know, we have not interacted this process, and I must not, seems as if I had any exposure. So yesterday was the first time that we were interacting with this process. I know that our predecessors had started the process. Honorable Xulu, very brief, as well as Honorable Nkosi, was of course also very brief because we were, I think, disturbed by COVID then. Honorable Xulu last year started the process, could not continue with it. And I think the majority of us, I was checking, the majority of us who are here do not have any kind of exposure into this process. So it's a new process to all of us. But I think that we have learned from the experiences of Gauteng, experiences of the budget office in Cape Town, as well as the experiences of Eastern Cape. Here is the presentation. Members, it's open to the floor for discussion. I'll take the hands, start with Honorable Dex, Honorable Nxamalala. Any other members that would want to have a discussion? Okay. Let's start with that. Those members. Of course, Honorable Prothoset is also noted. Honorable Dex.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chairperson, and thank you for the presenter, Ms. Benjiman, for the presentation. The presentation was clear. We understand what the bill tried to achieve. However, there is some views that one have on this here. But what I want to find out, what is the time frame? Is there any time frame perhaps set by that we must finish this process? There's a time frame or set for us to finish this process, or is it open-ended? The reason why I asked that is that I think that we would like to take this to our party caucuses for all members to make input before we express our views here. Because as you said, that we're all new to the process, and we will have to, in fact, speaking for my caucus, I will have to take it to the caucus for them to make input before we express views on the poll. Although I personally do have views on it. So I just want to know, is there a time frame that been set aside to complete this process? Thank you.
So much, Honorable Nxamalala.
No, thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. Let's welcome the presentation. Indeed, as you've said, it was detailed, very clear. I think Honorable Dex read my mind, because there are so many issues that were raised by members yesterday, particularly issues that you are raising, Chairperson, that need us to have a discussion on and look at the different options, and come up with what we'll think will be a good option for the province of KwaZulu-Natal. Therefore, my suggestion, which now supports what Honorable Mervyn Dex has raised, that we cannot conclude the process without us interacting with it in our different caucuses. We request that we have that process wherein we discuss in our caucuses, then thereafter, then as different caucuses come up with what will be the guidance of our caucuses. That is my recommendation, which supports what Honorable Dex has already raised. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think I can allow you to answer the question, then I'll deal with the other issues that honorable members are raising. You can just, because there was a question from Honorable Dex in terms of the time frames. I can answer that, but I feel that you better positioned. My apologies. Can we start with Honorable Prothoset? My sincere apologies, Honorable Prothoset. My sincere apology. You can take the stand.
Thank you so much, Chairperson, and my apologies to you, Chairperson. I did say I would be there in person today, but my challenges remain today. But I assure you, I've been a very attentive listener to both days of the proceedings. Chairperson, I just have two questions based on the bill itself. If I can just go to clause 6. And sorry, Chairperson, may I just preface with thanking Mrs. Benjiman as well, very much for her very clear presentation. fully appreciated, and thank you very much for that. So now clause 6 contemplates that each portfolio committee must submit the BRRR to the Finance and Budget Committee within 15 days of the tabling of the medium-term budget policy statement. My question arises out of the fact that I think we all know how busy our schedules get, especially with multiple members having to attend multiple committee meetings. So my question simply is this: from the date of the submission of the tabling of the medium-term budget policy statement until that 15 days, if a portfolio committee does not submit that BRRR, what is the consequence of that? Does the legislation contemplate that that it is then accepted that the portfolio committee has no input on the medium-term budget policy statement, or is there a mechanism for an extension, or what is the case? So in other words, does the portfolio committee have one bite at the cherry, 15 days long, and if they miss that deadline, then, you know, their section of the medium-term budget policy statements is regarded as accepted? So that's my first question. The second question relates to clause 10.7. We found it there. 10.7 contemplates giving the Finance and Budget Committee quite a far-reaching power to recommend to the House that amendments suggested by other portfolio committees be rejected. That's quite a strong power. And so my question is that if this budget and Finance and Budget Committee rejects amendments proposed by a portfolio committee, does that portfolio committee have any right of recourse to another level, another platform? I'm not sure. And then my follow-up to that is that what is contemplated in clause 10.8, where I think the MEC is afforded a right of response. So if I can just get clarity on those two clauses, they interest me. Thank you very much, Chairperson. I appreciate it.
No, thank you so much. You can then respond to the three questions.
Thank you, Honourable Chair, and thank you for the comments by honourable members. With regard to the time frames, yes, there is a time frame or time limit imposed. Firstly, it's a compliance issue. There's a legislative gap that has to be addressed, and it's the passing of the bill has been flagged on the strategic risk register of the institution. So we have developed an implementation plan with dates, which we had to supply to the Audit and Risk Committee. And the date here is the 31st of March 2026. So we've got till the end of the financial year to deal with it. With regard to Honourable Browterset's question, the 15 days tabling, you asked what would be the consequence of a committee not dealing with it within 15 days. We understand committees are busy. We just have to bear in mind that the whole budget cycle is so tight in terms of time frames. We know when we even get budget documents how little time we have. So, and remember, the work of the Finance and Budget Portfolio Committee is predicated on responses by the other portfolio committees. So you see, we give 15 days to each portfolio committee, and if they don't submit, it's not a consequence, but it's going to impact the work of the Finance and Budget Committee, because they have 30 days to submit. If I can just quickly go back to that, is it 6.4? I just want to read from that. Sorry about that. Within 30 days after receiving the reports, it must submit its recommendations to the House. So one builds on the other. So if a committee doesn't submit, it means the Finance and Budget Committee won't be able to submit within 30 days, and all within this narrow time frames of budget processes. With regard to 10.7, the strong power, the power to reject, I think maybe just let's see this in context. We are forcing the committee, the legislation forces the committee to reject where amendments are inconsistent with the fiscal framework or not motivated adequately. So it's not a arbitrary power. It forces the committee to reject where there's inconsistency. So remember that list we went through where there's a lots of checks that need to be complied with before an amendment is even considered. So it's a check and balance so that you don't just amend or unravel the budget, if you haven't examined these things. With regard to the right of response, I'm not sure what exactly that is.
I think the 10.8 talks about the right of response of the affected MECs.
Yes.
I think that's it's a clear and straightforward provision.
Yes, because before you can amend,
yes,
you have to give it's audi alteram partem, as they say, right of to respond here.
Yes. No, thank you so much. I think, honourable members, before Dex leaves, that let's agree that we've got a project plan. So what we'll do is that we'll provide to all of the party leaders the project plan that will amend, which will include the necessary consultation with parties. We will put it so that it will be part and parcel of the project plan, so that that consultation does not take forever. Because now we've got a clear, limited time frame that by 31st of March should have adopted this, because it has been flagged by AG, and we ought to then comply in that way as the legislature. So would include this process of consultation with the caucuses, various caucuses, so that this process is owned, at a party political level. So that area, so we'll do that at least by Tuesday next week. Would have then sent to all of the party leaders to say these are the time frames that can we please, have been consulted, so that our process can be able to move forward, so that we do not have an open-ended consultation, which is very important. As I had mentioned, that for us it's new. I was interacting with this process for the first time yesterday. So I think this is going to be very important that we do that necessary consultation. But I feel also that the benchmarking still has to take place, not necessarily by the chair of the Finance Portfolio Committee, by the chair of chairs, of course the finance chair, together with the chair of chairs, and at least 2 other chairpersons of committees, so that the process is a bit broad in terms of understanding, so that when the report comes, at least that benchmarking is done. That determination as to where and how the benchmarking, I think, is still a subject of consultation, so that we are clear on the process that we ought to undertake moving forward. But otherwise, I think we are fully in agreement in this regard with regards to this issue. So I think if we can just that discussion, summarize it in that way, I'm sure we can have progress in this regard. Thank you so much. I don't see any other hand in relation to this. I'm sure Honorable Dex can be a release for tea now. Then there is a presentation, which is our last presentation, which we need to take. But the presentation, that's why I'm saying it was a subject to us looking at, having decided that we are still going to consult with the process of the party political process. Now, the presentation deals with the strengthening of the existing budget, KZN Budget and Content Unit for effective budget and money bills oversight. The assumption in this presentation is that this is the route that we are going to be taking. That we are going to be utilizing the internal capacity, which yesterday we indicated that we've got a bit of serious difficulty with that approach. Now, I need guidance from honorable members whether we take that presentation or we wait for the process that we have identified so that we can be able to move forward in this regard. So I need guidance in that regard. Honorable Deputy Chair of Chairs, demand.
Thanks, Honorable Chairperson. Morning, honorable members, the Secretary and officials. I think I agree with you, Honorable Chairperson. It will be premature to deal with this item. Let's allow the process as outlined to take its course, and then we'll see after we've chosen an option whether we listen to this presentation. Thanks.
Any other members? Honorable CQ.
Chair, what you have outlined, I was also of the view that maybe we must hear from them to say, because what we are saying is what we support, whether it will be a train smash for us to deal with the process and then we go to this presentation that we are supposed to receive, because the chair is correct. Yesterday we raised a certain, concerns around the issues, because the chair is saying it's the first time that he's seeing that all of us, it's the first time that we are engaged in this process. But the presentation was really superb by the legal advisor on our proposal in regard to this thing of PPO, just to combine the committee and budget, So yes, we are going to digest it going forward, but also as members, we have got a feel of what the chair is saying. But maybe, Chair, if you can give them maybe to say the way we are looking at it, is it something, because yesterday the legal advisor said maybe tomorrow it will be clearer, when the presentation is done clause by clause, and then indeed it was clearer, when she was going through that thing. So we appreciate, Chair, and also the sum up that you have done to say that let us have that process that will be outlined and then go to different leaders of the political parties. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. I think then that process, as we are agreeing, because of course the process is for you, honorable members, not my process. It then takes us into that item number 5 for the presentation on the strengthening of the existing KZN Budget Content Unit is taken out. We'll therefore go straight to item number 7 and request the Chair of Chairs to do the vote of thanks for us on our behalf, and then we'll go to lunch. Honorable Chair of Chairs.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. Greetings to yourself, greetings to all the honorable members, and also the honorable members, the chair from Gauteng. We, Chair, thank you to yourself in particular for organizing this workshop. It was empowering, as you said, it was the first time interacting with this. Some of it was a bit twisted in our minds, but we followed through. I was talking to Honorable Mavimbela here, saying this is how me and her, because we come from that side, we were saying maybe if this Honorable Chairperson started yesterday with this presentation, then the other ones for us to compare would have easily followed. But nonetheless, it was very empowering. Thank you so much to Honorable Onyai, if I'm not mistaken, for also taking time to attend, and all those who presented here. Thank you very much, and thanks to the legislature team led by the secretary as well for being here. Enjoy your weekend and make sure that you are safe. Make sure that you are good to other mankind out there. You know, people are going through a lot, Honorable Chairperson. You find people here smiling at work, but when they leave here, they are going through a lot. So let's all try to be good to each other. Thank you very much.
We are invited for lunch. It's going to be ready at 11 o'clock. But we are all invited for lunch. Thank you so much.
you.